What's up guys, and welcome back to another video, and today we are going to be doing a bit of speculation. I figured I'd do some speculation videos to fill the void before we get another game announced, basically, whether that's Pokemon Stars or Pokemon Diamond and Pearl remakes, or I don't know, Pokemon Sun 2 and Moon 2, whatever they might be and whichever platform they might be on. I figured I'd do speculation on basically any of the games. So obviously Pokemon Stars, do some speculation on whether it's a remake, whether it's a sequel, etc. And then we might, you know, obviously we're fairly confident we're getting Diamond and Pearl remakes, so we can speculate on what we might see in those games, which is what we're doing today. So there'll be a whole range of different things. And of course, as always, if you have any topics that you're sort of fixated on, if you've got this idea in your head for, you know, Stars or a Diamond and Pearl remake of what they could do to make it really sort of extravagant, do let me know down below, because I'm always happy to take in any ideas people have, because generally you guys have better ideas than me. So, but we'll jump in today and we're going to look at possible Diamond and Pearl remakes as mentioned, and talk about Sinnohan Forms is what I'm going to refer to them as. If anyone's got a better name, feel free to let me know. But of course, Sinnohan Forms were introduced in Pokemon Sun and Moon as a regional variant, or the first regional variants as they were described. Now these were alternative, or I'm sure you guys already know this, it's just a quick preface, but alternative typings and forms for Pokemon we already knew and loved. So Vulpix got an ice type form, different abilities, different moves, stuff like that, and obviously Alolan Golem, rock electric type. So sometimes it was a drastic change from fire to ice, sometimes it was a bit more of a subtle change from rock ground to rock electric, or normal to dark normal in the case of Rattata and Raticate. So that's what we're going to be looking at here, and we're going to be looking at possible regional variants that could be introduced in Diamond and Pearl remakes, so sort of regional variants that were exclusive, or that are exclusive to the Sinnoh region, so as a, you know, hence the Sinnohan Forms. Now what I'm going to be doing in this video is I'm going to be looking at the, I guess in my opinion, the most likely ones. Now for Sinnohan Forms, they were only Generation 1 Pokemon, okay, so it's just a throwback to Gen 2. We had similar thing kind of in X and Y with the Megas. Obviously there were a lot of different generations, but we would assume that, you know, then, so obviously we got Megas for the Kanto starters, then when we got Oras, we got Megas for the Hoenn starters, so it sort of shifted along generations. So off this video, for the most likely, in quotation marks, we're going to be looking at Generation 2 Pokemon, yes, Generation 2 Pokemon, because you assume obviously Generation 1 variants for, you know, Sun and Moon, and then you shift up the generation to Generation 2, and possibly 3 or 4, well obviously not 4, you can have Sinnoh variants in Sinnoh, but yeah, possibly 2 or 3, have some variants there for the Sinnoh region. So I'm going to be looking at that. So I took the Generation 2 decks and I've narrowed it down to the most likely ones. Now what I did was I took out any evolution lines that had Mega Evolutions, because generally we can assume Megas are not going to get Sinnohan Forms, or, you know, regional variants I should say, because that would just be too much for that single evolution line. I've also taken out any Pokemon that either had pre-evolutions in a separate generation or evolutions in a separate generation. So Slowking introduced in Generation 2 of course, but it had Slowbro and Slowpoke in Generation 1, so it's less likely to get a form, I feel, because Generation 1, all the lines that were touched were exclusive to Generation 1, there was no branching, there was no, you know, Mr. Mime for example didn't get a form, so we're going to do that. So that actually narrows it down a hell of a lot, like just to complete it to like 3 or 4 different lines. It's crazy how much it narrowed it down, and that's why I'm saying it's probably going to extend to Generation 3 as well, because there's no way you're going to get it out of that. So yeah, so stuff like Steelix gone Mega Evolution, Apom has Ambipom, which, you know, obviously is not going to get a form because that's in Generation 4, so that's not going to happen. Sudowoodo, same thing. Blissey, same thing, all the way down to a few here we do have to look at, which of course is what we're going to look at in the video today. But of course, as I mentioned, even if they are spanning, so like Elekid has obviously Electabuzz from Generation 1 and then Electivire from Generation 4, you could possibly have a Sinnoh form for that, but it's less likely than these. So we're looking at, in my opinion, the most likely ones if we keep it exclusive to Generation 2 and stuff like that, the current rules. So I've spoken about this for long enough, let's jump in and have a look at the first line, which is going to be Hoothoot and Noctowl. So of course, introduced in Generation 2, doesn't span any other generations other than Generation 2, and of course is in the, oh yeah, I should have mentioned, I'm looking at Pokemon in the Sinnoh decks. That was a really clear thing that I should have mentioned. So not just taking the whole Gen 2 decks, I'm taking the Gen 2 decks, extracting the ones that are in the Sinnoh decks, and then saying, you know, these ones, if they could change them slightly, you know, would still be in the Sinnoh decks, and Sinnoh decks would be the same, except there'd be variants of existing Pokemon. They could say, we're going to add extra Pokemon to the Sinnoh decks, and those are going to be the forms, so that, you know, negates this entirely, but I'm looking at just these Pokemon from those Sinnoh decks, and that go by all these rules. So without further ado, let's jump in. As I mentioned, Hoothoot and Noctowl. So what might we see from these two? Well, first set of different types of forms, you can go for a darker type. We saw lots of dark type Alolan forms be introduced, so Generation 1 had some dark types. You could see a similar thing here. Yes, the dark type was introduced in Generation 2, but you could still bulk it up a bit. So you can see dark flying types for Hoothoot and Noctowl. You can see these more darker, more, you know, foreboding designs. So rather than having these psychic types and, you know, having some psychicness to it with Noctowl, you could see more of a dark and foreboding rather. You could even mix in some ghost types in there as well if you really wanted to. Ghost flying, I suppose, is a possibility as well. Then next up we have these really cool ideas. As you can see, Hoothoot and Noctowl are buried in the ground. Now, this seems really stupid to begin with. It's like, what? How? Well, burrowing owls are a thing. Now, of course, they have to be not actually going to be like digging through the ground in some aspects, but they will burrow to create burrows and such. So you could see a ground flying type possibly for Hoothoot and Noctowl. I believe these two types here are actually like rock ground. I'm not sure you can throw a rock type in there really, because then you lose the flying type, and that's sort of what Noctowl and Hoothoot are all about. But ground type possibly is definitely a good call for burrowing owls if they really want to, you know, put that sort of inspiration in there. So that's definitely another one I'm thinking about. And then the third one is a snowy owl sort of thing. Now, this is a really clear one. You don't even have to think about different variants of this. You can just put a snowy owl in here. So Hoothoot and Noctowl being snowy owls, ice flying most likely, because again, owls. And of course, remember, Sinnoh has this big snowy area to the north side, you know, north of Mount Coronet and that mountain range. So you can definitely see some snowy Hoothoot and Noctowl up there if they had some Sinnohan Forms, which is definitely a good shot for me. Thinking about what a Lola has that actually caused the form. So you have like, you know, Vulpix came and then they were chased up the mountains and then grew cold. So maybe Hoothoot and Noctowl were hunted to the north by, you know, some other Pokemon and had to adapt against something like that. So I could definitely see that happening there. Here's just an alternative design for a snowy Noctowl. So rather than just being white, it could be sort of more bulky and have stuff like thick fat as an ability. Would work pretty well there. So there's a few ideas for Hoothoot and Noctowl. If we move swiftly on to the next line, that could be this. It's a known. It's not going to happen, guys. A known has got loads of forms already. It's not going to get a regional form. The only thing I could see is like maybe different colour, but even then that's absolutely stupid. You then have 28. There's 28 forms normally, so you have 56 forms, which would be crazy. They're not going to do that. So no, sorry, dude, you're just gone. So then we move on to Wooper and Quagsire. So these are in the Sinnoh decks. Obviously, they're in the Great Marsh. So I could definitely see a form based around the Great Marsh for these two, because they're in there currently. You could just say it gets even marshier and they have to adapt to that sort of area. Yes, okay, they're water ground, but there could be areas of the marsh that, you know, cause them to change. So the first here is actually a different one that's not related to the marsh. This is a ground electric type, so similar to Stunfisk is the feel I'm getting off for these two, which I suppose might be possible. I don't see it really happening, but ground electric, so, you know, drop the water, throw some electric in there. It's possible, I suppose, but not my favourite. And then if we look over here, we have some pink ones. So we have pink Wooper and pink Quagsire. Obviously, it's slightly different again. So this, they don't have specific typing attached to them, but I could see possibly a poison water typing there. So seep some poison in, maybe, which is linking into my Great Marsh idea, which this last design here shows off a bit better. So like a poison ground type rather than poison water. You could say, you know, maybe they lived in toxic marsh for long enough that, you know, the Krogunk that lived there had to become immune to the Krogunk because Krogunk is poisonous. So it gained the poison type itself by, you know, maybe taking in some venom from Krogunk and stuff like that. And I could definitely see it happening. I think it'd be pretty cool to get like a poison ground type. We've had them before, obviously. Have we had them before? I think we've had them before. If we haven't, then again, it'd be cooler. But definitely something I'd like to see happen. And the Great Marsh is obviously where they inhabit anyway, so I could definitely see that happening there. Then we have, not really an evolution line, but a Pokemon Girafarig, again, in the Sinnoh dex. Doesn't span generations, and it's generation 2 Pokemon. However, you can't really do much with Girafarig because it's Girafarig, it's a single line, it's a single Pokemon rather, there's not too much you can do it. But the main thing, obviously, it's a normal Psychic type, so the main thing I could suggest is you mess with that normal typing. You keep the Psychic one possibly there, and just mess with the normal typing, have it be changed by its environment. So this first design here is supposed to be an Electric Psychic one, so obviously switching normal for Electric. It's got a taller neck, so I suppose it acts as like a Lightning Rod, so that's pretty cool. In terms of, you know, the environment, there is a, well, not a power plant, there's like a few Fuego Ironworks in Sinnoh, so possibly you could link it in there, or you could say if it's cropping up near Sunny Shore City, the electric gym there might be affecting it somehow and causing this extra spurt of growth in its neck, and then it starts conducting electricity and goes on like that possibly. The other idea though I had for this is upon seeing this design for a Sinnoh Girafarig, which is actually pretty sick. My idea here is switch the normal type out for a ghost type, so it switches as like an undead Girafarig. So you can see here, obviously the tail is a different design style of course, but the tail is actually more monstrous I suppose, rather than before, and you can see that the spikes on its back have sort of crumbled out, so it's like an undead Girafarig. I feel like a ghost Psychic type would be pretty interesting to see for it, not like amazingly, revolutionary. I'm pretty sure we've seen ghost Psychic types before, but I feel like it'd be pretty cool to see still, because you could, maybe in terms of linking in, I know there's that there's the fog in Sinnoh, so maybe you could say wandering in the fog, it became absorbed, something along those lines as an origin story. That's just another idea there. And we only have one more line to look at, because that's the only ones that actually fit the criteria of it in the Sinnoh Dex, Generation 2, not spanning, stuff like that. So this line is Octillery and Remoraid, so fish and octopus. So what could you do here? Well, I haven't got too many ideas, but the first one I saw these designs, which I think would work pretty decently. So you can see they're basically made of rock here. We have a rock type, a Remoraid I believe it's intended to be, and a rock type Octillery. So obviously Octillery is based on a cannon to some extent because of its nose, I suppose you could say, its nozzle, which can shoot out ink, so making it a rock type and sort of basing it off a tank might work pretty well. I think the actual particular basis for these two forms is that they are fossilized, so in terms of how you could write the origin story in game, I don't think fossilization is an overall good way to go, but you could certainly say that maybe it had to disguise itself as a rock to hide from some prey, maybe Gastrodon, like munching on some Remoraids, who knows? But I feel like a rock type would be interesting. Maybe pure rock. I don't want to see rock water really. We've seen too many rock waters in my opinion. So maybe pure rock just moves on land, becomes like a rock, and then it can get its prey like that. It's interesting. Another idea I did have upon seeing this design is possibly a water electric type for Octillery at least, so Remoraid could stay the same, and then maybe if you leveled up your Remoraid near Sunny Shore City, for example, again with that electricity crackling around, it gains some electric typeness to it, so obviously gets a yellower design, and obviously it's electric type, so it can use Zap Cannon would be pretty cool to see it using there. So that's a couple of ideas I've thrown out there. Of course, if you guys have any others for these typings for these Pokemon, or other Generation 2 Pokemon you'd like to see get a Sinnohan form, because maybe they're not in the existing Sinnoh Dex, but you could see them being brought in and changed around, in terms of how they'll go for it, whether they'll take existing Sinnoh Dex Pokemon and give them variants, or whether they'll bring other Pokemon into the Sinnoh Dex and variant them up, because it's a change from obviously Generation 4 you didn't have the variants, so whether they change the existing ones there, or say in this universe there are more Pokemon here, and they change because of that. We'll have to see how they do it, if they do it, because of course these remakes are not confirmed, but we can expect them at least. But that is going to be it for me today, so I'm expecting to do some more Sinnohan form speculation at some point, so again, feel free to let me know what Pokemon you could possibly see getting Sinnohan forms, whether it's Generation 2 Pokemon, Generation 3, or maybe even go crazy and have like a Generation 6 Pokemon have a Sinnohan form, something crazy like that. Let me know what you're thinking, and we'll have a comment in the description, a comment in the comment section. Anyway, this is going to be it for me for today, so I shall see you next time. Thank you for watching. Goodbye, my friends.